So I wanted to start, actually, before we get too far into this, by just extending our thoughts and prayers to the participants in the Boston Marathon yesterday, and to the friends and families of all of those who were either injured or who had someone who was injured by the events. I think like a lot of you, I spent a lot of time watching the screen last night and just seeing this parade of horrific images floating by, and I kept thinking about, how do I talk about this to my kids? How do I go home, and my daughter's 8 years old, and how can I describe to her how to be safe and also not live in a world with fear, how to not be dominated by fear and anger? And I think the next couple days are going to be particularly difficult for the people in Boston, but I think that all of us who are involved in a public discourse about what we want our country to look like have a role to play in making sure that we don't, as in past incidents like this, how we don't become gripped by fear. I think that we're here today really to offer a vision for what we want the country to look like. We know that we're here today because there are millions of people who are out of work, 5, 6, 7 years past the beginning of the Great Recession. There are millions of people who are underemployed or who have given up looking for work. We know that we're here today because right at the time when we should be investing in public infrastructure and we should be strengthening labor rights all across the country, we're cutting public spending and we're eroding labor rights and the rights of working families all across the country. We're here today because right at the time that we should be accelerating a transition away from dirty fuels, we've seen record droughts, record wildfires, record storms, a temperature in 2012 that was a full degree Fahrenheit above the previous record temperature, and we're going nowhere in terms of federal policy on climate change. We're also here today because the people who often are at the front lines of our environmental struggles, undocumented Americans, don't even have an ability to use the full rights of citizenship to fight for clean air and clean water and a healthy environment. The Sierra Club was founded 121 years ago on the basic idea that we want to take people into nature to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. Our founder, John Muir, really started the Sierra Club almost as an adventure travel organization. He took people from the San Francisco Bay Area into Yosemite National Park with the idea that if you expose people to the wonders of Yosemite Valley, that they would become inspired to take action for the environment. They would become inspired to protect Yosemite Valley and protect places all across the California Sierra. We've since grown into an organization with chapters in every state, local volunteer groups in almost every major city across the country, but we have the same basic ethic that we want people to explore nature, but we also want them to explore what it means to live in a just and sustainable world in the 21st century. And that commitment extends to our commitment for social justice. We know that by working with LIUNA, we can cut greenhouse gas emissions. We can cut the amount of energy that we're using by investing in energy efficiency and create jobs. We know that we can work with the United Auto Workers and cut the amount of oil that we're using in our cars and trucks and create jobs at the same time. We know that we can work with the transit workers all across the country and cut the amount of energy that we're using there, cut congestion, and cut jobs. We also know that solar panels don't install themselves, and that millions of people all across the country, all around the world, can be put to work by creating a clean energy future. We know that wind turbines don't repair themselves, don't maintain themselves, aren't manufactured by themselves. But what we also know is that the Blue-Green Alliance, the labor movement, the environmental movement, won't come together by itself. We won't really become a unified movement simply by fiat, or even simply by holding a conference. It's going to take work. It's going to take work at the local level. So all of these tables out here this morning, all of the work that we're doing at the state level, that's where our successes will come from. If we are to build a unified movement to work for environmental justice, to work for economic justice, to put millions of people to work, the only way that's going to happen is if we find new ways to work together. One of those projects could be to make sure that every public building all across the country invests in energy efficiency. Another one of those projects could be making sure that solar panels are installed in every community building, every state building, every federal building all across the country. One of those projects could employ hundreds of thousands of people over the next generation by repairing and replacing old and dirty water pipelines or gas pipelines, where we can invest in new infrastructure, cut greenhouse gas emissions, prevent methane from escaping from our gas pipelines, and put hundreds of thousands of people to work altogether. None of this happens by itself. All of this is dependent on energy coming from the grassroots, from local communities, town by town, city by city, state by state, all across the country. Despite the fact that we're already seeing the effects of a warming planet, we also are reaching a new tipping point. We're starting to reduce oil consumption. We've cut oil consumption by several million barrels of oil per day over the last several years. We're starting to replace dirty fuels like coal-fired power with solar and wind and energy efficiency. We need to make sure that as we transition away from those dirty fuels towards clean energy, that we're bringing the workforce along with it and we're creating jobs, we're adding jobs, and taking care of the workers in the process. So how we do that is really up to us. It's our job to provide a clean energy vision and then take that vision to policymakers and corporate executives all across the country. So it's great to see so many people here today. I'm excited about what we'll be doing over the next couple days, and I know that if we're going to create all these jobs, we've got to get to work ourselves. So thanks everybody for coming.